Nice to see you. Welcome. This is actually one of my favorite stories, and you're probably familiar with it, but I'm going to go a slightly different spin on it. Who here's heard the story of Goldilocks? The adults don't know it, so we can surprise them. So this is the story of Goldilocks. You know, Goldilocks, she's walking through the forest. She's got long blonde hair, and she wanders. Are you Goldilocks? Are you Goldilocks? No. No. Whew. Because Goldilocks, she kind of misbehaves in this story. She sees this house in the middle of the forest, and she wanders in, and she sees 3 bowls full of porridge. Now, I'm from Scotland. Porridge is my favorite breakfast food. Have you ever had porridge? No. You're missing out big time. So there's 3 bowls, and it's a big bowl. It's oatmeal. It's kind of similar to oatmeal. We call it porridge, except porridge is better. It's very similar, but porridge is better because it's Scottish, you see. No, we put salt in it rather than sugar. That's just my opinion. That is true. I'm full of opinions. And you remind me of my daughter, because she told me exactly that last night. And so there's porridge, and there's 3 big bowls of porridge. A big bowl, a medium-sized bowl, and a small bowl. And Goldilocks tastes the big bowl, and ow, that's too hot. And she tastes the medium bowl, goes, oh, it's too cold. And she tastes the little one, goes, that's just perfect. And she eats all the porridge. But it's not her porridge. And then she goes, oh, I'm a little sleepy after eating that porridge. So she goes to bed, and she goes to the first bed, this big bed. She's jumping on the chair. I don't know that story, Milo. Okay, Milo, you take over the story. No, okay. I don't know that part of the story. I'm just going in the Abridged version. Well, she goes to the bed. So this is my opinion as well. She goes to the bed. So she goes to the bed, and this bed is too hard. It's a really hard bed. And she goes, oh, I don't like this bed. She goes to the next bed, which is a kind of slightly smaller bed. She goes, oh, that's too soft. Then she goes to the smallest bed. She goes, oh, that's just perfect. And then she falls asleep. Well, the people who live in the house, you know what? They're not people. They're 3 bears. And the bear comes, and the first one, the first bear, the biggest bear, looks and says, looks at the bowl, someone's been eating my porridge. And then the medium-sized bear looks at the medium bowl and goes, someone's been eating my porridge. And then the littlest bear looks at her bowl and goes, there's no porridge left, someone finished mine. So then the big bear goes to his bed and says, someone's been sleeping in my bed. And the medium-sized bear goes, someone's been sleeping in my bed. Then the smallest one goes, someone's still sleeping in my bed. She fell asleep. Goldilocks wakes up and runs off because she's a bit scared of bears. Now, one of the things that story we're supposed to learn from it is to find the right size of things, like find the bed that's the right size, find the bowl that's the right size. But also, you shouldn't be eating and sleeping in eating other people's foods and sleeping in other people's bed and even going into their house. And that's a kind of traditional story, but the story I've always wondered about for a long time is not sitting in a chair. Yeah, I don't know that part of the story. But the thing I always wonder about that story is, why does Goldilocks not have her own house? Why does Goldilocks not have her own bowl and food? And why does Goldilocks not have her own bed? So that's really interesting. Why is she going in there? So that's what I always think when I hear that story. So whenever we hear stories like that, I think it's always a good question to ask. Why is she doing that? Why doesn't she have her own food? Why doesn't she have her own bed? Why doesn't she have her own house? I think that, what do you think? Why do you think she doesn't have her own house? It's a good thing to think about. Well, thank you so much for listening. So be thinking about that. Anytime you hear a story like that, always be thinking, why? It's always a good question. So thank you so much for listening, and it's time for your religious education class now.
Housing insecurity is everywhere. It is a state of not having stable or adequate living arrangements. The following scenarios are true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, as stated on Dragnet. Andy and Karen bought a nice-sized mobile home to live in, but it's difficult to park it, find parking, and some jurisdictions outlawed living on the street where you park. And then again, they have to move their home every 72 hours to be in compliance with parking rules. Frank has HUD housing. He has lived in the same apartment for nearly 18 years. Payment is based on his income. He works 40 hours a week at a minimum wage job, less than $20 an hour. He may have to move in with his mom and commute 30 miles one way if Mr. Trump or Musk or Doge put HUD housing on the chopping block. His commute is 7 miles now. Not too many years ago, I got a 60-day notice to vacate and find another place to live during the dot-com boom. The landowners were going to remodel the duplex where I lived and triple the rent. 60 days was not a lot of time to look for another property to rent. I wanted to live alone. I could not find a place that I could be a fundamental right. It's the principle of the thing. It's about justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Our second principle from not too long ago. And because it's the right thing to do, that's why we should care.
My name is Neil Abcouwer. My pronouns are he, him. They're just building such big apartment buildings downtown. I've heard it from many folks around town, in my communities, in this fellowship. And it makes me feel awkward because my kids, my wife, and I live in an apartment building. And when somebody doesn't want your kind of home in their community, it feels like they don't want you in their community. San Mateo County is one of the wealthiest places in the entire country. The overwhelming majority of residential areas are only, and are allowed to be only, single-family homes. My family can't afford the down payment or the mortgage payments on the median $2 million home. Many other families can't as well. It is only in an apartment that I can be here, pursuing my career and being part of this community. Around half of the homes in San Mateo County have not changed hands since the 90s. And so Prop 13 keeps their property taxes artificially low. Back when Aurelia and I were fortunate enough to own a small condo in Los Angeles, we'd walk a block or two to the nice neighborhood and play the game, guess how much more we pay in tax than that mansion? You can look it up, you can play it at home. Under Prop 13, folks whose children have moved have no incentive to downsize because they would pay more in taxes. As a result, young families can't move in and the tax base is kept very low. Now in our San Carlos neighborhood, filled with multi-million-dollar homes, the property taxes are so distorted that the elementary school is chronically underfunded, literally classified as such by the state of California, and relies on private donations and fundraising just to have art and a librarian. I'm often asked, how can we get more young families to come to our church? To that I say, how many young families can even be here to be brought in? Others may ask, why are some young people growing more conservative? It's partly because so-called liberal states have failed miserably to increase living standards for their younger residents, instead heaping material benefits on incumbent homeowners. Our faith calls on us to address these problems. Our values of generosity and equity call on us to dismantle Prop 13, which distorts the housing markets and leaves our social programs bankrupt. Our values of interdependence and justice call on us to make housing available to all. Build more homes, build apartments, build townhomes, duplexes, bungalow courts, all the missing middle density homes that can arrest this crisis. Contact your representatives to make these changes and vote for candidates that promise to do so. So the next time you walk in downtown and you step into the shadow of a big building, I want you to stop and imagine. Imagine what lies behind those windows and the manufactured facades. I want you to look past that one big building at the hundreds of homes, the hundreds of families just like mine who could not be part of this community if those big apartments did not exist. Thank you.
These are the words of my colleague, Reverend Maureen Killoran. Holy is this place. Several flames burn in our bowls of sand. Blessed is this ground on which we sit. Holy is this place. Holy are the places of memory, the places which have formed us, where we store the icons of success in shattered dreams, and gather threads and pieces of what we would become. Holy are the places of memory. Holy are places of our dreams. The places over the rainbow, where all children are wanted, all people are fed, and everyone is housed. Where colours are the source of celebration, and youth and age come to the table as one. Holy are places of our dreams. Holy are the places of change and pain, the places of our struggle, where the rivers of our lives run white and fast, and we hold on and grow. Holy are the places of change and pain. Holy are the places of connection, the places where we risk ourselves, where hands, touch souls, touch minds, and in awareness still, we change lives. Holy are the places of connection. holy are the places of becoming, the places of clear vision, where life and world are intertwined, and we can see forever in this moment and give thanks. Holy are the places of becoming. Blessed is the ground on which we sit. Holy and whole making is this place. I invite you to join me in a time of silence. I was talking to my daughter last night, and she usually comes in when I'm working in my order of service, and she goes, "So what's the title of the sermon tomorrow, Dad?" I said, "It's why we should all care about housing." Ever the honest person, she goes, "That's not a very imaginative title." I said, "I don't even have to ask you what it's about." I usually give her the title, and she kind of gives me a blank look. But the origin of this service was back in January. I was meeting with a group of clergy in San Mateo County. There was rabbis, there was Quaker, there was Catholic, there was Protestant Christian ministers there. There was 6 of us, and we're deciding housing after climate change is the biggest struggle I think we have in San Mateo County. So we felt we needed to do something, and you may not be aware, but May is Affordable Housing Month. There you go. I didn't know that either. And so it's really important to think about housing and address it. I was talking to Neil actually just before the service, and he said, "Yeah, we probably need more than a month to address this." But I think we're all touched by it. But I think one of the things, and when we discussed it, I came up with this title, is like fundamentally, is why should we all care about housing? Because those of us who have a house, who have got, property tax from the 1980s, it may not be a problem for you. You may have your mortgage paid off. It may be a house that was being passed down from your family for generation upon generation. Of course, due to the racial discrimination in federal and state housing policies, many people of colour were excluded from that way of building up wealth. We all know about redlining, where you couldn't get federal housing grants for certain areas. There was inflated pricing for certain people. There was covenants in houses. There's covenants to this day in San Mateo County that says you cannot sell your house to an African American. That's not legal, but it still exists in many covenants for houses in San Mateo County. So the housing market's not been fair. People have been excluded out of it for many years. But when we talk about housing, I think we need to think of home, the idea of home. Because I think home has got 2 distinct qualities to it. One is the physical building we live in. And the other thing is the area that we live in, the neighborhood, the community that we are part of. And I think housing cost is tearing apart our communities. Many people we rely on, and this became apparent during the pandemic, the essential workers were often people who don't live in the neighborhoods they work in, certainly in San Mateo County. The essential workers. Sarah mentioned who they were. The people who take care of the infirm, the shop assistants, the child care providers, the serving staff in many places. But they can't afford to live here, often on minimum wage. I know when I moved here from Texas, and I want to acknowledge, I am a well-paid Unitarian Universalist minister. Over half my salary was going to rent. Over half my salary was going to rent. So it exists amongst all of us, and I think many of us know our children, perhaps when they leave home and go to college or start work, they're probably not going to be able to live here and move back here. So it tears apart the fabric of a family. The idea of 3 or 4 generations living in a house may happen again because that's the only way they can live. I know my daughter at 21 still lives with me in an apartment. And then elders, when we get on to fixed incomes, it's often hard. They can't downsize, as Neil talked about, because property tax, Prop 15, has kept it low, that if they move to a smaller place, it would be more expensive for them. It doesn't allow to downsize, so it doesn't allow this turnover of houses. So it inflates the prices for everyone. We all should care about the cost of housing, because we are all impacted by it. And the fundamental problem is we do not have enough housing. We're way behind in California for building houses, and as Neil said, so much you can only build single-family homes. We need to increase the density of housing. Apartments, the big apartments, and I've heard people complain about it as well. The big apartments in Redwood City are such a bad thing. It's an absolute necessity for people to live here. I live in an apartment in San Francisco. I looked for 6 months to, buy a place here in Redwood City. I couldn't afford it. It was cheaper for me to go to San Francisco. The most expensive city, or one of the most expensive cities in the US, was cheaper than Redwood City because there was more supplies of apartments and condos there than here. So the system's totally distorted. But why is this a religious issue? Nikolai Berdyaev, the 20th century religious philosopher, he was Russian, said, bread for myself is a material issue. Bread for my neighbor is a spiritual one. Now I'll paraphrase that. Housing for myself is a material issue. Housing for my neighbor is a spiritual one. It's also a spiritual one for all the reasons that Neil mentioned with the values. Our values of justice, equity, interdependence, generosity. Those are our values, and the housing market is destroying our communities. And I think it's only getting worse. And we've seen it over the past 30, 40 years, what brought me to Silicon Valley. We increase these jobs, but we don't increase the housing supply to match all these jobs. So what happens? Now, I'm not an economist, but I understand supply and demand. When you have more jobs and you don't produce the housing values can only go up. And we all know not everyone has a high-tech paying job. So it's not sustainable, what we're doing. But there is a solution, and it is more housing, but it's more affordable housing as well. And it's more affordable, high-density housing is really the solution. But you look at where high-density housing is, you look at where the RV parks is, most of it's east of 101. And what happens east of 101? Sea level rise. San Mateo County is ground zero for sea level rise in California. East of Highway 1 is most vulnerable to that. So affordable housing, we need to start saying yes to affordable housing here. And quite a lot of the opposition comes from the city government under pressure from the local community. People do, rightly or wrongly, and I don't think there's any evidence to support it, people believe that crime will go up with more high-density housing. Traffic will go up with more high-density housing. But that's why you need high-density housing close to public transport. It's been interesting, I mean, many of you know I travel by Caltrain 3 times a week. The housing around Caltrain is becoming more desirable now because it's quieter now. There's not the diesel pollution now. So that's becoming more desirable housing. So there's this idea of mass transit is also connected with high-density housing, which is also connected to climate justice, which is a huge topic for us in this community. It can be solved. We have the money to solve it. What we don't have is the community and political will. Are we willing to go and advocate for more affordable housing next door to you, down the block from you, next to this church? What about making this church high density, affordable housing? What would be the opposition to that? From within us, from our neighbours. That is the problem. It's a political will. You need 3 things to make housing happen. You need land, you need money, and you need the political will. That's why advocating for housing is so important. And that's why when we got together with my clergy colleagues in January, we thought, we need to call attention. We need to start advocating for affordable housing because every one of those clergy members was struggling with accommodation in San Mateo County. San Mateo County is one of the most expensive states, most expensive counties in the state. California is one of the most expensive states in the country, and US is one of the most expensive country in the world, so you know this is probably the most expensive county in the world to live in. Yet, in the idea of home, I love Northern California. I want to live here, as so many other people do. It's a desirable place to live. What's the biggest obstacle most of us have with living here or staying here? It's affordability. We see it as our families leave for other areas, for entry-level jobs that they can't sustain living here. We need to care about housing for ourselves, for building the community around us. We may have the home, the perfect building that we wish, but the neighborhood around us, the people we care about, the families with children that we want to become part of this community, that we want as part of our neighborhood. We love the sound of children. Gigi, our office manager, and I were talking about that on Friday. When Open Gate, our preschool, is not here, this place is so quiet. We love the noise of that, and that's what home is. Home is certainly the physical building, but home is often the people that are in it. People are in the building. The neighborhood we're in is often... Woo! I think that's telling me time's up. What is it for? Missing adult. Now we know who doesn't put their phone off during worship. But that silver alert is a point. Do you know who are some of the lowest income in San Mateo County? 22% of those considered extremely low income are over 65. 24% of those who are considered low income is children under 16. Almost half the people that are considered low income are either children or those over 65. If we are striving to be a more intergenerational, multi-generational community within here, and religious communities are one of the few intergenerational communities we have. But we want our neighborhoods, we want the park, we want downtown, we want our apartment buildings to be intergenerational. So that's why we should all care about housing, because it enriches not just the environment, it enriches our experience of home as home in Northern California, in the Bay Area, in San Mateo County.